Burnt Toast!
Hi, this is the Burnt Toast Show. I'm your host, Todd Harold, and this is the album Spotlight for this week. This week's album is none other than one of the great live albums of all time, Donny Hathaway Live from 1972. For my money, one of the three greatest live albums of all time. The other two being Little Feat, Waiting for Columbus from 1978, and the Allman Brothers at Fillmore East from 1971. I think you also have to include the Fillmore stuff from the following album, Eat a Peach, a half live, half studio album, because that's also from those same recordings at the Fillmore in March of 71. We're not talking about that right now, but those are great albums. So the big three, Allman Brothers, Little Feat, Donny Hathaway. Donny Hathaway was an American singer-songwriter, keyboardist, and arranger mostly known in the 1970s. He had three notable songs that got a lot of attention, the first two being duets with Roberta Flack, Where Is the Love? And then later on, The Closer I Get to You, and the perennial Christmas favorite, This Christmas, with the bridge in 7/4. That's Donny Hathaway. Donny Hathaway wrote that, and we hear it all the time every Christmas. For me, it's one of the cooler Christmas songs. He was a songwriter and session musician for Curtis Mayfield's Curtom Records, although he worked with a lot of other labels as well. He was on all sorts of sessions, and as an arranger, keyboard player, and songwriter. And he was spotted by King Curtis, the legendary saxophone player, who also has a great live album out, King Curtis at the Fillmore, and signed to Atlantic Records, their subsidiary, Atco Records. He was on Atco. His first album came out in 1970. It was called Everything is Everything. Really great album. Some of his compositions, and then some covers, some unusual covers like Misty, the Earl Garner jazz tune that he does a very individual take on. His second album was called Donny Hathaway, and that came out in 1971. And that was mostly covers, including a really, really stunning version of Leon Russell's Song for You. In 1972, he did a duets album, his first duets album, with, the only one that was released while he was alive, with Roberta Flack. And as I said, that resulted in a top 10 hit, Where Is the Love? That I believe won a Grammy that year. And that really sort of put Donny Hathaway on the map. And then came the live album. Donny Hathaway Live was recorded August 24th through the 30th, 1971, at Doug Weston's Troubadour in Los Angeles. And that was side one. Side two was recorded October 8th, 1971, at the Bitter End in New York City, in Manhattan. That was side two. Both just regular club gigs. And the Troubadour, in particular, is an interesting place for Donny Hathaway's career to really take off, because that was where Elton John played his first American gig, was at the Troubadour. That was also the place where Linda Ronstadt and Jackson Browne and Steve Martin and so many others were discovered at Doug Weston's Troubadour. To a certain extent, Crosby, Stills and Nash sort of started there too, and many others, as I said. Donny Hathaway in August of 71 at the Troubadour, in October of 71, all in one night at the Bitter End. The album was produced by two legendary producers closely associated with Atlantic Records, Arif Mardin, who worked with The Rascals, Daryl Hall and John Oates, Aretha Franklin, Chaka Khan, Queen, and Phil Collins, among many others, and one of the co-founders of Atlantic Records, Jerry Wexler, who got Ray Charles signed. He was instrumental in signing Ray Charles and Led Zeppelin to Atlantic, and he worked closely with the Allman Brothers Band, Ray Charles, and Aretha Franklin. So some really great producers on that one. On side one, we have Donny Hathaway on the vocals, the piano, the electric piano, and the organ. Phil Upchurch from Chicago on the guitar, Mike Howard on the guitar and background vocals, Willie Weeks on the bass, Freddie White on the drums, and Earl DeRuin on percussion. On side 2, for the New York gig, Phil Upchurch couldn't make that one, so they used the legendary Cornell Dupree on the guitar. Now let's talk about some of these people. Donny Hathaway was a highly respected musician before he was known to anybody as a vocalist. So he was able to pull in some really great people that he'd known for a while, and some newer people too. Phil Upchurch, the guitarist on side 1, was a Chicago-based guitarist that we've talked about a lot here on the show. He worked with Curtis Mayfield, Otis Rush, Jimmy Reed, Woody Herman, Stan Getz, B.B. King, Ramsey Lewis, The Rotary Connection, George Benson, Cat Stevens, and Michael Jackson, among many others. Willie Weeks, the bass player, one of the most prolific bass players of the last 50 years, still out there touring with Boz Scaggs right now. He played with David Bowie. He's on Fame and the Young Americans album. He toured with Eric Clapton, played on some of his stuff. As I said, Boz Scaggs, Greg Allman, James Taylor, he's on How Sweet It Is to Be Loved by You. Joe Walsh, I believe that's him on Life's Been Good. Steve Winwood, Stevie Wonder. He was a full-time member of the Doobie Brothers after Tyran Porter left in 1979 for a few years. He worked with George Harrison and toured with George Harrison, John Scofield, Ronnie Wood, Michael McDonald, and many, many others. This guy's the real deal, Willie Weeks. And this is probably his greatest, his most legendary performance is Donny Hathaway live. The drummer was only 16 years old at the time that this was recorded. Freddie White, he was the half-brother of Maurice and Verdine White, the gentleman who formed Earth, Wind, and Fire. And he went on to join Earth, Wind, and Fire after this album and played drums on all of their hit songs in the 1970s and 80s. For a minute, he was also a member of Little Feat. He played on their studio version of Spanish Moon, which I believe was on Feats Don't Fail Me Now, I want to say. Maybe it was the last record album. I should have written all this down. But anyway, he was on Spanish Moon. Earl DeRuin is an interesting guy. He wrote 2 songs on this album, and he also wrote Right On Marvin Gaye's What's Going On album and played on that album. He was a Puerto Rican percussionist. He's featured by name on The Ghetto on side 1. He's also featured by name 10 years later in 1982 on Stevie Wonder's song Do I Do, Earl playing it by himself now. That's a quote from Stevie Wonder. He did it better than I did. Cornell Dupree, the guitarist on side 2, a legendary guitarist, played with Aretha Franklin, Miles Davis, Bill Withers, King Curtis, Joe Cocker, 2 gentlemen that worked extensively with Ray Charles, Fathead Newman and Hank Crawford. Brooke Benton, he was the guitarist on Rainy Night in Georgia. Billy Cobham, Elvin Jones, the Average White Band, and he was a founding member of the band Stuff, the great instrumental soul band based out of New York. That's kind of legendary. If you see Saturday Night Live from the 70s, they were on there all the time. On side 1, we have 4 songs. What's Going On, that had just been recently released by Marvin Gaye. And while Marvin Gaye's version has to be referred to as the definitive version, I also think of this one as kind of a definitive version. Very distinct arrangement and vocal. That if a band played this, you would know that that was the Donny Hathaway version. There's a brilliant electric piano solo showcasing Donny Hathaway's amazing keyboard skills to go along with being one of the greatest soul singers of all time. The second song was originally on his debut album called Everything is Everything, and this track called The Ghetto, with a very memorable and sort of legendary bass line. It was a feature for Donny Hathaway on electric piano and Earl DeRuin on percussion, and also involved some really cool audience participation with Donny getting the audience at the Troubadour to sing 2-part harmony with him. The next song is Hey Girl, a song written by Earl DeRuin. I mentioned that he had written some stuff for this. And the 4th song, closing the first side, is You've Got a Friend, a song written by Carole King that was at that time, when they recorded that song, when they recorded this album, it was the #1 song in the country, James Taylor's version. Carole King recorded it on her album called Tapestry, and then James Taylor recorded it the following year, or maybe later that year, on his album called Mudslide Slim and the Blue Horizon, and it was James Taylor's only #1 song. This is a very different take on it, and extremely soulful, very different from what you associate with You've Got a Friend. The second side starts off with another Earl de Ruin composition, Little Ghetto Boy, and then a Donny Hathaway original called We're Still Friends. After that, we have a John Lennon song from his album called Imagine, a very distinctive version of his song Jealous Guy, which is an unusual choice. Actually, James Taylor and John Lennon weren't usually covered by soul artists, although the Isley Brothers were kind of doing that kind of thing at the same time. And we close out with a song from the first album, Everything is Everything, called Voices Inside Everything is Everything. On the original album, on the debut album, that was a vocal song. On this one, it's just an instrumental, and it features some really amazing bass playing from Willie Weeks. It's really a nice extended jam. So the extended jams were The Ghetto and Voices Inside, because if you're going to do a live album in the 70s, you got to have some extended jams, you know. After the live album, Donny Hathaway did one more album, Extension of a Man, and that featured one of his great compositions, Someday We'll All Be Free, and a really memorable cover of the Al Cooper song that was originally done by Blood, Sweat, and Tears, I Love You More Than You'll Ever Know. Once again, I think that Donny Hathaway's is the definitive version of that song. He started getting into classical composing, citing Ravel, Debussy, and Stravinsky as influences, and started writing soundtrack music, and did the theme from the TV show Maude, starring B. Arthur. However, in 1973, he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, which took over his entire life. In 1973 and 1974, he was hospitalized several times, and at one point was taking 14 different medications twice a day. They were working, but as he began feeling better, he would stop taking the medications, and then sort of things would get worse again. After years of estrangement because of his mental illness, Roberta Flack invited him to sing a duet on her 1978 album, Blue Lights in the Basement, a song called The Closer I Get to You. Once again, like Where's the Love, it was a huge hit and really sort of seemed like maybe Donny Hathaway was coming back. But on January 13th, 1979, at a recording session, they were working on a duets album, a full album of duets with Roberta Flack and Donny Hathaway. And there was a recording session on the 13th of January, and Donny Hathaway's behavior became extremely erratic and delusional. He told producer James Mtume that white people were trying to kill him and had connected his brain to a machine for the purpose of stealing his music and his voice. At that point, the two producers of the session decided that nothing was going to get done tonight, so they sent everybody home. Donny was staying at the Essex Hotel, which, if you remember Saturday Night Live in the 1970s, all the guests stayed at the Essex Hotel. There was a little ad at the end of every show about how they all stayed at the Essex Hotel, which was off of Central Park South. And Donny jumped out of a window that night, 15th floor window. They found the door locked from the inside, and the glass had been carefully removed from the window. And they saw no signs of struggle, so it was ruled as suicide. So Donny Hathaway's struggles with mental illness were finally over, unfortunately in the worst possible way. After his death, an album was released of more recordings from the Bitter End and the Troubadour. It was called Donny Hathaway in Performance. It came out in 1980, and it's really, really great as well. There's a great version of I Love You More Than You'll Ever Know on there that I don't know why isn't on Donny Hathaway Live, but it's not. And then later, there's a compilation disc called These Songs for You Live that came out in 2004 that has stuff from Donny Hathaway Live and in Performance, sort of all on the same album. So that's worth checking out as well. His daughter Layla Hathaway is sort of carrying on his legacy. She sounds a lot like him, and she's won a couple of Grammys. She's a great singer, and it's great that we still have her around singing as we think of Donny Hathaway Live. I hope you enjoyed tonight's show. This is the Burnt Toast Show Album Spotlight. I'm your host, Todd Harold. As always, the show is sponsored by Premier Chiropractic, 7113 West Jefferson Boulevard, Fort Wayne, Indiana. Dr. John McDonald, an affordable walk-in clinic. Go see Dr. John. He's the best. This is Todd Harrell, and I'll talk to you soon.
Burnt Toast!